Ah, hello, everybody out there, wherever you are, on YouTube and Facebook, and hello to Barbara here in the room. So we're gonna get started with a brief centering and prayer, and then we will spin the wheel. We got new questions, so I invite you just to go within, to become aware of your breath. To recognize with me that that breath is the breath of the infinite breathing you. That there is one infinite, ever-present allness, whole, perfect, and complete. That it is perfect love, perfect peace. That it is the very intelligence that holds all of life in perfect accord. That it creates out of itself to experience itself in the multiplicity of form. That we are each that. That the very chair we sit in is the divine in form. It was here as this building before I entered it. Is this technology that we're using. And so I simply speak a word for this time together, allowing myself to be informed by the wisdom of the infinite within me, to be used of spirit, to have its intelligence revealed within and as me. I know that the perfect right people are joining this time. And so in that truth, in that knowing, I simply celebrate. I let go of any idea of numbers, any idea of who, and simply lean into this time with excitement, with fun, with a sense of adventure and curiosity. And so knowing that this is already perfectly ordained, that everything that needs to be known is known, everything that needs to be said is said, everything that needs to be heard is heard. So we let it go, we let it be. And so it is. All right. So if you're joining us for the first time, what we do is we spin this magic wheel full of questions, and then we just tap into the infinite and see what answers come up. So here we go. This taps right into a conversation we were having before we started. Is science of mind Bible-based? So, yes and no. It is certainly not strictly Bible-based, and Ernest Holmes quotes the Bible frequently. He also misquotes the Bible frequently. So science of mind is really an assimilation of pretty much all of the religions. One of the things that I really appreciate about ministerial school that we go to is that we study all of the religions the same way that Ernest Holmes did. And it's about finding the commonality, because everybody does it different. Everybody. And so we have groups of people that interpret spirituality through Christianity. We have groups of people that interpret spirituality through Islam. We have groups of people that interpret it through Judaism. through Hinduism, huge Hindu influence in science of mind. Huge Hindu influence. And that comes from Thomas Troward, who, depending on who you read, influenced anywhere from 25 to 75% of what Ernest Holmes studied. There's the influences of Sri Aurobindo. There's the influence of um, Henry David Thoreau and Emerson, and so, and it's the ancient philosophies are in there, and so is it Bible based strictly? No. Does it exclude the Bible? No. We tend to interpret the Bible through a metaphysical, metaphorical perspective. That what are these stories actually teaching us, and to find those commonalities. So that's pretty much the nuts and bolts of it. And different ministers, I tend to use the Bible frequently because I'm familiar with it, I'm comfortable with it. I have a healed relationship with the Bible, and it took a long time to get there because growing up, the Bible was used as a weapon to beat me with. And so, I think depending on our individual experience of the Bible and our individual level of healing, some of us use it, some of us don't. But science of mind per se is definitely has some influence, but it is not strictly Bible-based. So I'm looking to see if there's any follow-up questions or comments in Facebook or Zoom. Have to recognize that there's a little bit of a delay for those folks. So, yeah. I see we have one person, our faithful Deborah on Facebook. Hey, Deb. All right. Let's see what else we have today. How do we create effective affirmations? Well, there's a couple of elements that are really advised for affirmations. One, that it be affirmative, that it affirms what you want to experience. And a big thing is to really frame it in the present. Too many times when we write affirmations, we write them in the future, that I'm going to experience, rather than I am experiencing, rather than I have, rather than I am something. The reason that we really need to put it in the present is because affirmations ignite, and they really come from our faith, right? We have to remember that thoughts are things. And so if we're affirming that someday I will have, well, then what we're telling the universe is we're not quite ready for it today, but someday we'll be ready for it. Versus knowing that everything is fully present in the moment. But we tend to write our affirmations based on our desire for later, rather than believing that it's already present. It's challenging, if I'm trying to pay my rent and I look at my bank account and I have $100 in my bank account and my rent is $1,500, it challenges our brain to affirm that I have the money to pay my rent on time, because we don't see how that's going to happen. And that's where faith comes in. Faith is the belief in things not seen. It doesn't take any faith for me to say, I have a phone in my hand. It's right there. I can feel it. I can see it. No faith is required. It takes a little bit of faith to believe that what I don't see already exists, is already mine, and that what created me is going to supply that exactly when I need it. Yeah, the comment in the room is, that's not what we were taught. Absolutely. And that's why it conflicts with our brain. It conflicts with our earthly education. That if we don't have something, then we have to strive to make it happen. Now, my experience with affirmations is they're not magic wands. Okay? So if I affirm that I have, I'll go back to ministerial school for a minute. I had no idea how ministerial school was going to be paid for. No idea. And the money was not in my bank account. Okay? And so I put these teachings to the test. You know, it's like, okay, I am going to affirm that I have everything I need to successfully pay for ministerial school, to complete ministerial school on time. And what happened as I continued to affirm that, somebody sent me an email and said, hey, can I open a GoFundMe account for you? Sure. Right? But there was a time where I would have said no, because I would have been operating under the teaching that I got from my father that said, you're an Ellis, by God, you don't take nothing from nobody. Okay? So if I were still operating from that belief system, then I say no. No, you can't do that for me. As we begin to practice and live in faith, then we recognize those things that pop up, right? People would contact me about picking up odd jobs. Sure, I'll do that, right? And so when we're living in that affirmation, knowing that it's already there, it opens us up to see the avenues of manifestation. And Spirit unfolds it. And, you know, there were times where the day before I was registering for class, the money was not there. And then the last day of registration, poof, you know, the GoFundMe account would explode with just enough money, or I'd get a check in the mail for just enough money, or I'd get a side gig that paid me in advance. But term after term for 2 years, it showed up right on time. It didn't show up in my comfort zone. Right? It didn't, because my comfort zone would have been to have everything in the bank before I started. That's not how it happened. Right? But it did show up, and I completed ministerial school debt-free. All of my books, everything I needed showed up right when I needed it. because I acted on faith. And it didn't mean I didn't have moments of trepidation. It didn't mean I didn't have moments of doubt. I had plenty of moments of doubt. But in those moments of doubt, that's where the affirmations come in. And we repeat them and we repeat them and we repeat them to anchor them so that, and if we have arguments, great. Those arguments are just surfacing the beliefs that are in the way. And that's where Ernest Holmes taught denials, that, denial is an effective part of spiritual mind treatment. That we, so when we have doubts, we start with recognizing what the infinite is, that we're that informed, and then before we get to that third step of affirming what's true, we actually use denials that there is no lack or limitation in spirit. Because that's true. There is no lack or limitation in spirit. There might be lack and limitation in my belief system, but there's no lack or limitation in spirit. And so we speak those denials to clear that stuff that's in the way, and then we affirm a realization of truth, that there's no lack or limitation in spirit, that there is no insufficiency in spirit, that I am a center of infinite abundance, that everything I need is already fully present. And we claim it, and we claim it, and we claim it until we actually believe it, till we embody it, until it becomes our truth. And then we're grateful, and we let it go, and we move on paying attention to where the divine nudges show up to guide us to participating in the manifestation. But if we look at affirmations as a magic wand, that all we have to do is say, well, this is what I want, and then we sit back and wait for spirit to deliver it while we passively no longer participate, we don't understand that we are an integral part of the whole system, and so it doesn't work because we're not operating in alignment. Make sense?
God can only do for me what he can do through me.
Exactly. The comment in the room was, God can only do for us what it can do through us. We are active participants, absolutely. And so, affirm what your heart desires and affirm it in the present. Know that it's already exists. And then participate in the manifestation of it. Let me check and see if we got any comments here. All right. Nothing showing up there on Facebook. Let me refresh the page and see if that makes any difference. Sometimes it does. Nope. All right. We're going to go through several questions. Good question. Why do we say stop telling your story? It doesn't mean don't share. Let's start with what it doesn't mean. It doesn't mean you don't have a history. It doesn't mean you don't have a past. It doesn't mean that we don't share our experiences of life with one another. When we say stop telling the story, we mean stop talking about it like it's still happening. Right? Because I think it would be more clear if we used different language that, you know, sounds like you're telling that like it's happening right now, and it's really in the past. So how do you let it be done when it's not still happening? You know, when we replay, and notice that when that comes up that we need to stop telling our story, I personally have never had that happen when I was telling anything but a negative story. We don't ever tell our past victories like they're still happening. It's always woundedness that we're repeating over and over again. Right? Because we're still hurt, and we're living in the hurt, and we're living in unforgiveness. And that's what we're really talking about, is stop regurgitating the past in the present like it's still happening. How do we let it be part of the past? Well, I think in order to stop telling the story, we have to heal what the story's about. Whether it's resentment, and all of mine, all of the stories I needed to stop telling were all very healthy, fertilized resentments. Right? And every time I told those stories, I felt the resentment, and I was telling them from a place of victimhood rather than victory. Those are the stories we have to let go of.
Would you say that that's the biggest problem in the world, is that we whatever the resentment, which leads to more hate?
Mhm. Yeah.
Because, I mean, this, a lot of this stuff's from way back
Yes. So
years ago.
so the question in the room is, would I say that the biggest problem that we experience in humanity is continuing to replay resentments that result in more hate? Yes, I would. It is our unhealedness that we repeat, that we keep alive over and over and over. And what we're doing when we do that, right? Remember, thoughts are things, okay? And so if our focus is on resentment, if our focus is on our hurt, or if our focus is in pain, there's no way for us to create anything other than more resentment, more hurt, and more pain. And we're in a place of victimhood, and when we stay in a place of victimhood long enough, we lash out, and that's that place where hurt people, right? Healed people are part of healing people. And so it's an inside job where we each get to resolve our own resentments and our own pain, and to stop acting those out. And it's hard. It's hard, especially for people who were actually victimized. You know, somebody breaks into your house, you're a victim of a burglary. If you're sexually assaulted, you are a victim of sexual assault. It's when we begin to live that victimhood, when we take it on as an identity, and we live from the victimhood, that we get in trouble with it, and we don't heal. We just keep that pain alive.
Would you say in a lot of situations, the lack of, in young years, love
Hmm.
would lead to a lot of resentments too?
Sure. The question is, do I think that early on in our lives, a lack of love creates resentment that impacts us? Of course it does. Because as human beings, what we most crave is to be seen and celebrated for exactly who we are. Um, and I think one of the challenges is that as humanity, we aren't really taught how to love well. We're taught how to love conditionally. We're taught that conception of love that if you love me, you would, or you don't love me if, right? All of those conditions. And the truth of the matter is, I can love someone and disagree with them. I can love someone and distance myself from direct participation in things that they're doing that offend me. Doesn't mean I don't love you. It means I don't want to participate in what you're doing. But we tend to lump all that stuff together. I think for most of my life, I had no idea what it meant to love somebody. Because I didn't have many great examples of that. I will say I was blessed to have my nanny, my grandmother on my mother's side. We called her nanny. I have to clarify that because some people think I grew up with a nanny. No. we didn't have no nanny taking care of us. That was my maternal grandmother. But when she disciplined us, she started with, I love you. She made it really clear she loved us. And then she clarified, I hate it when you lie. I hate it when you steal. I hate it when you fill in the blank. She made the discipline about our behavior, not about who we are. And then she would bookend it with, and I love you. And so I didn't know at the time, but what the gift that she was giving me and teaching me was that I am not my behavior. That me is purely lovable. My behavior, not so much. It wasn't me she didn't love, it was my behavior she didn't love. And I'm not my behavior. My behavior is evidence of choices that I made. But that's not the truth of who I am. But, not many of us get that gift. And I didn't get it at the time. I didn't know that that's what she was doing. But, my nanny was also one of the early Al-Anon folks. Apparently, and I don't have any memory of my grandfather. He passed away when I was 6 months old. But he was, by all accounts, a brilliant attorney and a nasty, mean drunk. And so, she honored her wedding vows. I suspect based on her religious beliefs, based on her upbringing, um, and she was born in 1906, and so, it's a different generation. It was a different mindset that, till death do us part really did mean that to her generation. Um, but she also got help for herself, and she got education for herself, so that, you know, I might stay married to you, but I'm not gonna be abused by you anymore. And she set limits, and you know, she she is what I would call a, some people say black belt Al-Anon. She was like a ninja Al-Anon. And so she demonstrated how to love beyond the conditions of people's behavior. Um, if we were all raised with that, I think we'd have a whole different world. And it's never too late to shift. And that's the work of, our spiritual growth is, it brings in forgiveness, and, it goes back to, we have to stop telling the story from a place of woundedness. We have to heal. And the only way I know to heal from that stuff is to forgive. And sometimes it feels like, how do we forgive the unforgivable? Well, nothing is unforgivable. That's grace. That's where we extend grace. Yeah. And it really depends on whether I'm listening to my head or my heart, whether I'm listening to my woundedness or I'm listening from my spiritual truth. And it doesn't mean saying what somebody did is okay. It's simply recognizing that nobody is their behavior. Doesn't excuse the behavior. But I think in order to forgive ourselves and other folks, we have to get clear that behavior is evidence of beliefs. It's not the truth of who we are. It's just the truth of what we believed when we acted out those behaviors. And beliefs can change. And when beliefs change, behaviors change. That's kind of how it goes.
I was told children should be seen, not heard.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess in a way that's true, but in another way, if you don't listen to what a child's saying,
Mm-hmm.
and you're just saying, you need to, so whatever,
Mm-hmm.
how's a child supposed to know or to learn or to feel maybe love?
Right. So the statement in the room is, when we're raised with, and many of us in our generation were raised with, children are to be seen, not heard. And the truth of it is, if you don't hear me, how do I know you see me? And again, it's generational, it's cultural, and it's, things evolve, and if we watch the pendulum of parenting, right? It goes from, if you spare the rod, you spoil the child, to everybody gets a trophy just for showing up. And then that creates challenges for those kids because, a lot of kids that were raised with, with that mentality have such a sense of entitlement and so little frustration tolerance that they have difficulties navigating the world. And so, it's all a part of evolution. And hopefully, when we know better, we do better. And some people shift beliefs and some people don't. And, it's back to that everybody does it different. And ultimately, the only mind any of us can change is us. I can't change your mind. I can't change anybody's mind. I can offer different things for people to think about. But if we really think about it, no one has ever changed our mind except us. And we have to extend that same understanding to everybody else. Even when even when we think they really need to change their mind, right? But they don't.
Too much here, too much there,
Mm-hmm.
not enough here.
Mm-hmm.
Because
Yeah.
everything seems to go too far this way,
Mm-hmm.
or then too far this way.
Right. And that's the whole pendulum effect, you know. But if you take a physical pendulum and hold it here and release it, then yeah, it goes here, and it goes here, and it goes here, and eventually it will come to center. Eventually it will come to center. And eventually humanity will come to center. Humanity will awaken to its magnificence. Can I give you a date and time? No. I wish I could. I'd make it yesterday. Just retroactive it one day.
Well, you said
Yeah.
that in the affirmation.
Yeah.
In this case, I don't think that's the
Yeah.
one of those.
Oh, it absolutely is an affirmation that humanity is awakening to its magnificence. It is. It has to. And part of the challenge is we have to understand that the whole idea of time and space is human created. Spirit doesn't operate in our realm of time and space. It is not bound by time and space, right? And so just because we're not experiencing it doesn't mean it isn't already here. Right? Electricity was already here before we figured out how to use it. And so the awakening is already here. And just like electricity, it's simply waiting for us to use it. But it's already here. We're already each whole, perfect, and complete. And when we each become aware of what already is, then things shift. But it's already here. And that's the faith piece. Because, our ego, we need to see it. It's that place of, I'll believe it when I see it. And the reality is, we'll see it when we believe it. It's tricky. It's tricky. Yep. And so if we, just to circle back to the question, the more we can heal the charge that is connected to our story, that's really what we're saying. To heal the woundedness in our story. Doesn't mean we don't have a history. Doesn't mean we don't have a past. It doesn't mean we don't have memory. We do. But can we tell the story without a charge? That's the trick. That's the healing. It's big. Yeah. But it's possible. It is possible. All right, here we go. Whoop, same one. Why do we teach tithing? Well, because tithing, it's lots of things. If we go back historically, the priest, tithing actually comes out of agriculture. That the first tenth of the crops were given, right? And they were given because the priest, they were not just the priest. When I was in ministerial school, it kind of blew me away. I was like, holy moly. The priest was the priest, they were the doctor, they were the lawyer, they had all the jobs of keeping the peace and making sure everybody was okay. So they didn't have any time to do anything else. So the people in the village took care of them, gave them their housing. We go back, a lot of faith traditions, a lot of churches have parsonages. Okay? Comes out of that same thing, that the minister, the priest was provided housing. They were provided food. They were provided livestock. All of the things that they needed to sustain themselves were provided for them by people giving the first tenth of what they had to support that person who was then supporting the village, taking care of all those things. It's just simply how they got paid, is my understanding of it historically. Why do we teach tithing? Well, we're sitting in a building that has expenses. Ministers don't work for free, right? And I laugh sometimes because there are people who think ministers shouldn't be paid. Well, when I can go to Safeway and get what I need to support my family and just wave as I walk out the door, then I won't, when I can have electricity and not have to pay for it, when I can go to the gas station and fill up my vehicle and not have to pay for it, then I won't need a salary. But we've created an economic structure here on planet Earth, so we have to take care of it. That's part of it. But tithing is a spiritual practice. And if we double back to something we were talking about earlier, that the affirmations and the faith that we already have everything we need, giving the first tenth of everything we receive is a practice of faith. And it really challenges our lack consciousness, because for many of us, we live paycheck to paycheck. A lot of people live paycheck to paycheck. And so the idea of giving a tenth of that scares the bejabbers out of people. It's like, we have this clingy thing that happens from our fear place, from our lack of faith, from our belief in insufficiency. And so whether we call it tithing, whether we call it conscious giving, it is a spiritual practice that understands that the law of circulation is how this universe works, right? Let's take science, right? Moisture, right? When there's enough moisture in the clouds, it rains. Rain nourishes the earth. It evaporates, goes back, fills the clouds, rains again. It's circulation, right? Everything in life happens in a circulation. Imagine giving as like a spiritual garden hose, okay? Well, water's already there, but you have to squeeze the trigger to let it out, right? We get worried that at some point it's going to run out of water. And so we kink the hose with our beliefs and we turn off the tap and we try to save every drop, not realizing that the flow is part of this process of circulation. And that when we block the tap, well, now there's not, things aren't being nourished. Water can't evaporate, and the whole system gets clogged up. And so whether we're tithing our talents, our treasures, our time, if we, imagine, I just fantasize sometimes about how our entire economic structure would change if every human being gave the first 10% of their time, the first 10% of their talent, and the first 10% of their money to what spiritually fed them. Then what is spiritually feeding them is sustained and grows, and that gives 10% to what spiritually feeds them, and we're constantly growing what spiritually feeds us. Tithing is like fertilizing our own souls. It's fertilizing what feeds us. It's keeping the circulation going. That's why we teach it. And it challenges our belief in lack. It challenges what we've been taught, that there's not enough. Right? Because when we're, at least in my experience, when we're grown here on planet Earth, we're constantly being taught there's only so much. And so we have to hoard it. We have to keep it. We have to lock it up. We have to, stash it away. That's not how the universe works. There's infinite. The universe is infinite. When we participate in the circulation, we participate in freeing resources. We participate in the movement of resources. We participate in nourishing every element of creation at some level. And when we shut it down, we're participating in the lack consciousness. So we get to choose. And it's a growth process. I think if we look at this, tithe literally means 1/10. And so if you're not there, start at 1%. Instead of 10%, start at 1%. Make a commitment to give something on a regular basis. And watch how it grows you. Watch how it, because all of the bugaboos that are floating around in the brain up there are going to surface. And then you get to write affirmations. You get to shift beliefs. And as you grow solid in that 1%, and you get really comfortable, and you see the benefits of the spiritual practice of giving, raise it to 2%. And then you go through that process at a deeper level. And we cannot outgive God. We can't outgive creation. But we can put a chokehold on it. We can stop our own flow in an instant by locking it down, by not participating in the circulation. So that's why we teach it as a spiritual practice. to live in alignment with creation. Make sense?
Like every little bit helps.
Oh, sure. Every little bit helps. And ultimately, it's more about where we're giving from than what we're giving. What is the consciousness? What is the belief system that we're giving from? You know, are we giving with a sense of gratitude? Are we giving with a belief that this is part of the circulation? Are we giving with celebration? Are we giving with thanksgiving? Or are we giving with resentment? Are we giving because somebody tells me I have to? Because if that's the case, it's better that you not do it. Because then you're just feeding resentment and growing more of that. You know? So it really is about a spiritual practice of consciously participating in the circulation of life.
It seems interesting that the people with the least seem to be the ones that give, like you said, from their heart,
Mm-hmm.
from they don't give because they have to give because they want to, but they're the ones that seem to have the most limited resources, whereas somebody that has a lot, it's like they're afraid they're going to lose
Mm-hmm.
this lot.
Okay. So what's in the room is that it often seems like those that have the least give the most, give with the most open heart, and those that have the most resources give the least or give grudgingly, that they seem to want to hold on to rather than give. I think our human economic structure certainly evidences that. I would agree that, you know, and it's that ultimately, where am I focusing my attention? Am I focused on what you're giving, or am I focused on what I'm giving? Because I can feed resentment. I can give from a perspective of, you know, I'm giving because you won't, or I'm giving out of judgment, you know, that my giving is more righteous than some millionaires giving who could give more and doesn't. I'm participating in that cycle of resentment and fertilizing that if I'm doing that. Ultimately, our giving is our own individual spiritual practice, and what somebody else gives, none of my business. None of my business. Is that easy to live day to day? No. No. And, you know, because we do live here on planet Earth, and it's easy to get caught up in all of the rhetoric about the 99% and the 1%, right? For me, that's about accountability. It's about where am I focusing my belief? Because if I really believe that there's enough, then what you do with yours doesn't matter to me. Doesn't matter. You know, I've certainly, in terms of earthly definitions, have never been part of the 1%. Right? But if I step back and I'm really honest, even though there have been hard times, even though there have been financial challenges, when it comes right down to it, I've always had everything I need. I may not have had everything that I thought I wanted, but I've had everything I needed. It may not have shown up in the way I imagined it, but I'm 61 and I'm still here. And so something has been taking care of me in those really challenging moments. You know? Yeah. I mean, I have lived, I lived for way too long in a Dodge Colt. Right? Eh, with a cat and a litter box and a dog and everything I owned. And, you know, it wasn't comfortable, but here I am. No worse for the wear, quite honestly. Did I feel sorry for myself at the time? Oh, good Lord, yes. Was that wasted energy? Yeah. Could I have probably changed that situation way faster had I surrendered to a spiritual process instead of feeling sorry for myself and, oh, poor me, and wallowing in victim consciousness? Probably. But that's what I did. And so, all right, I have an example of living in a way that I don't want to live, right? So I, we tithe. We're a tithing family, and it's the first 10%. It's not the second 10%, it's the first 10%. Because my belief demands that I demonstrate that by giving first to what spiritually sustains me and feeds me. Knowing, having the faith that everything is taken care of. And so far, it has worked just fine. And when I don't, there have been times where I have gotten caught up in lack consciousness, and what I have found is that the more lack consciousness I hold, the more fear-based I am, the less resources I have. Because that's what I'm focused on. All the universe knows, all the activity of law knows is, oh, Rafe believes in nothing, so here, have some nothing. Rafe's believing in lack. Here you go, have some lack. Thoughts are things. Right? And it's that taking responsibility for my beliefs create my experience. Because if I'm busy thinking about lack, I won't notice the opportunities that are right in front of me. I won't even see them. And if I'm living in infinite possibility, then those divine nudges that say, hey, wonder what's happening over here, and I go over there and there's a job that I would never have seen if I'm busy sitting in my Dodge Colt feeling sorry for myself. Then we don't even try. So, that's why I teach tithing as a spiritual practice. Sometimes I call it tithing, sometimes I call it conscious giving, sometimes I call it committed giving. It really, what are we actually talking about is the big thing. And if somebody has a woundedness around the word tithing, okay, let's talk about it, what it really is, the law of circulation, and it's a spiritual practice. And so don't call it tithing, call it something else until you heal that wound with that word. Because what we're really talking about is a spiritual practice of actively, consciously participating in the circulation of life.
In the respect of giving, it feels so much better.
Mm-hmm.
Like you said, giving because I have to, giving because I'm being pressured, giving.
Right. Yeah, to not give out of obligation, but to give out of a desire to genuinely participate in the law of circulation, in the reciprocity of life. changes the whole dynamic of the giving. Yeah. Yeah. Wow, it's 6:01. We blew through that really quickly. So thank you for joining us. I have a 6:30 class that I have to get home for, so I'm going to go off camera and shut all this down. I love you dearly. If I don't see you before, I'll see you later.